Welcome back to News and Views. We're going to be beginning this morning with, I think, a story that sits at the intersection of environmental justice, extractive politics, and importantly, constitutional rights. This week, the second annual CSOs Tailings Conference kicked off in Johannesburg, convened by activists, community members, and trade unionists, all with a single concern in mind, which is South Africa's mining future, and most importantly, the fact that it is heading in the wrong direction, to be honest. And at the center of it all is proposed amendments to the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act and the government policy paper on critical raw materials. On the surface, these efforts are branded as part of a green transition necessary to fuel clean energy, something that is a fancy word doing the rounds. Everyone is talking about it, but beneath that, critics say there's an orchestrated attempt to almost dilute environmental protections and sideline mining affected communities. The memory of disasters like the Jagersfontein loom very, very large when you kind of have these conversations with parties that are involved, and it is still very much unresolved. And meanwhile, climate change in itself is also intensifying the risk posed by tailings dams, those structures already threatening ecosystems and lives. And joining me now is Hassen. Lorgat is the convener of the SOS Tailings Working Group. He's a long-term activist and a very good friend of the station, and he's the main key organizer of this week's conference. Hassen, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Salailo. Thank you for having me.
I think let's start with what's at stake here. Why is this conference happening right now, and why are tailings dams something many of our listeners may not think about, never mind know about, and why are they such a pressing issue?
Yeah, Salailo, I mean, it's the second year, and our aim is very simple, to create awareness that when we hear the talk on the radio, that AI, there's great investments by Microsoft to start to give us cheaper AI and fast-moving technologies. All these propelled by what they call critical minerals. And we get excited because, cobalt is used in mobile phones and, they found in very few places. But what it means is this whole new rush for critical minerals. What the society is not informed about and what we don't think about is what will happen when there's a multifold, a bigger thrust. In fact, they're saying it must be 5 times more urgent that we need to get these minerals out because we need clean green energy, etc., which will help us because the climate is killing us, etc., etc. It's true, the climate's killing us. But if you look at how mining has been done in this country for 150 years, no poor communities, Limpopo, Northwest, none of them have been better off because of mining. So these guys have a challenge. When they sell us this ideology, things will be better, will be faster, will be better for all of us. It's actually looks like it's business as usual, and we have to be suspicious. But that's one part of it. But we also have to be suspicious in that we're not asking. This is the one side of it, right? I said elsewhere that mining is a is a waste manufacturing industry. It manufactures waste, and then they get a small diamond or they get a small ounce or whatever it is. But the major production that it unleashes on society is the rubbish, the tailings, the waste, and that these are permanent and they are man-made. We said yesterday, when people say diamonds are forever, or when they sell that ideology, you say tailings are forever, in that these are man-made, and when there's excessive rain, as has happened in Jagersfontein, these dams cannot take it; they burst, and then the consequence is that down communities living near there and further down, 12 kilometers, 35 kilometers, die. They die. And it's indiscriminate. It doesn't only kill the black, the poor, and the hungry. It kills everyone there. And the workers, and I said this to the mine workers who were present, they should take a greater interest in that because they die first. They're in that plants. and they just
mm,
go. So we're trying to create awareness that for every big thrust forward, you must start thinking how is this rubbish going to be controlled, managed, and secured? Can it be secured? Because we also say that the best tailings dams or facility is the one that you don't have to build. So this rush, this this rush, it's like a growth greed economy. Capitalism cannot survive with grow, grow, grow. And when every time you grow like that, you got to ask where are you going to dump this rubbish? What the others in Europe have done historically is to dump it in Africa. People got wise, dump it in the seas of Somalia, there, until the pirates and others so-called started challenging these guys because, it gave rise to new forms of resistance. What we're trying to do now is to create awareness that for every action, there's a reaction, and the reaction will harm us. Just take your time. When the president speaks about Microsoft's investment, when the digital czar from the DA in the GNU talks about, AI and the digital economy, they don't talk about how much drinking water these data centers use all over the world to cool these centers. You need clean water to cool. And we are a water starved country. In all their papers, I don't see them raise this issue. And I cannot understand how irresponsible our leaders can be. In fact,
mm,
I'm not saying you shouldn't talk about jobs. Yes, but you've got to talk about life. And then finally, our minister Mantashe, he even provoked me to write a poem about him. I've got a few poems called Poems for Mantashe, for Gwede. Basically, where he's trying to tell us you want oxygen, or you want air, or you want lights. What a choice is that? We want
mm,
light and we want oxygen, but without, I'd rather sit in the dark and be alive because we lived like that before, you know. But this idea that there's a choice, that some people have to bear the cross for the rest of the country. Why is it that people in Pumalanga have to die younger and die because of the pollution so that we can have light? These ethical questions are the essence of what your radio station is interested in, and all of us, we should ask those questions. Okay, green new energy. And also the point, I know I said finally, these weapons that the green energy would be using really, sorry, these minerals are used for armaments. So they use us to say, so you have made us very responsible to think of a circular economy. Really, is this another way just to make profits and also profiting through war? The NATO even listed 12 minerals that they regarded as critical. Our country's got a number of them they regard as strategic. They put coal, uranium, and this here is everyone's choice what you regard as important. The definitions are not standard. But what we
mm,
worried about in the mining change, the change of mining law, is that you don't tie the hands of poor communities to resist and to discuss, to be consulted, because this is what the bill is trying to propose, while they want to have a clear, consistent supply of raw materials, which will largely be sold to Europe and others. I mean, for whatever I'll talk about beneficiation, ultimately, I don't think we're up to the competition anyhow.
mm, mm. And I wanna just stay on this proposal to the amendment of the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act, because the conference is unfolding against the backdrop of those proposals, and also a policy paper on critical raw materials, if I'm not mistaken. You've warned, and we've had this conversation before, I'm not sure if you remember, you've warned that these proposals may be eroding rights of some of the people in these mining communities. Could you unpack what the most problematic proposals are, and why they're so critical for people to know and to understand, because of how they'll ultimately affect the poorest of the poor in our country?
So we're at a downside, Silailo. Our hands are tied. In fact, part of my analogy is that the minister Gwede, why I actually raise it, because he was in the mine workers union and we were in the metal union. And part of the thing that we all acknowledge in this country, if you're progressive, is that black workers were to wait 70 odd years to get full trade union rights, right? Whereas white workers had it from 1924 when the bosses tried to co-opt them. And what we're asking our leaders, who are all trade unionists, don't do to the communities what the white guys did to black workers. Give rights so that democracy can flourish and we can We have the right to say no. We have the right to resist, because this is, to dissent is essential in democracy. And what they're trying to do is to limit. There's no free, prior, and informed consent. And I was on a crazy thing yesterday. I was just saying to them that, a few years ago, the Human Rights Commission had hearings on the underlying causes of mining, how it impacts on poor communities. And I told the commissioners at the Human Rights Commission, that is my Quran, my Bible. That's the one I use, because we gave evidence there to say what is wrong in our society, and how it impacts on communities and how we can fix it. But you know what happens? And that the governments and the departments, the environmental affairs, water affairs, they all ignore that, particularly the mining one. They ignore those recommendations. It was an instructive one. It was so well participated. We had people coming in, but now they want to have a national dialogue. And I said, uh, uh, why have a national dialogue when we had it? People don't just want to speak Kamulong, just use your mouth, because you want to have the right to be listened to. And what we are having in the dialogue is, again, a one-way conversation where elites are going to be there, showing that they care for the people. You got to care every day. And the truth is, there in that document of the Human Rights Commission, there's a whole lot of recommendations. Communities must be consulted, how they must be consulted. Uh, any small information around social labor plans, whatever, must be put up front on the website. We don't have to struggle to get information. Half the time we think it's a victory just to get a document. What what nonsense is that? This is the preconditions to have real engagements. And the government has all those recommendations in the report and have ignored it. And now they want to have a dialogue.
Mm, mm. And speaking about government, they often say they themselves are hamstrung by outdated laws. Do you believe that's a genuine constraint, or maybe a convenient excuse that they'll always pick out of their pocket?
On the issue of tailings, Mantashe raised the right issue, that the law, there was a court case in 2007. The Beers took it, where basically they ruled in that court case, a wrong judgment, and he was right, that that these tailings, these mining dumps, right,
Mm,
are, are movable property and not part of the earth. They movable. You know. So, but what the judge there saw, that in those dumps, he said, in the future the technologies will become available, which is the thinking rather, where they will be remined. So already then, right, 2007 to 2008. Today, a lot of the remining for critical minerals is happening on mine dumps, right? And that they're trying to find the gems out of the waste. And they're telling people, look how great we are, we're fixing your environment. In Soweto, here in Meadowlands in particular, or in Riverlee, people have been living with the dumps for 30, 40 years. And now they are remining. Companies like Pan African Mineral Resources who are kicking up a fuss around this proposal that government's trying to regulate how these things are done. But remining has always been there. You apply for a license.
mm,
And what's happening is that the community are losing out twice. One, they've lived under this environmental racist regime for 40 years. There's been no rehabilitation of those landmines in terms of the law. Because when you open a mine, you must say, how this is how we're going to close it, right? There's no restitution for the human beings who've lived there. So the law makes a stronger claim for the land to be rehabilitated to the state that existed prior to your mining commencing, or better, not worse. But it says nothing about the people. So the people must be made better. But many of them who live there the last 40 years are dying. They're dying of
mm,
asthmas, flus, cancers. Cancers are big. There are people in Rivoli on respirators. And when there's load shedding, these guys, they have to make up their minds whether the battery will be strong enough to see them through. So this is the impacts that are ignored. So that restitution is integral to the package of healing the land and the people. So clearly, so that judgment is now being addressed by this new bill. We want to try and see in this morning session, talking to Yachusfontein people, uh, uh, whether their experience will be captured fully by law. And we know law doesn't do that. And this is part of the reason that we're going to have further discussions today. really think we need to have a chat tomorrow. And I invite you to speak to this leadership who formed an organization inside Yahoo to turn things, they want to turn things around, make it better for their community, and hear it from them. Just want to give you a parting teaser. Everywhere you
Hmm.
talk about Yahoo, you hear one person died, one went missing. The community has done good research to find that 5 people were killed by the disaster, right? One went missing, presumed dead, part of the 5. And that in September, we want to try and have a commemorative meetings to try and create awareness about the climate impacts, the disaster, because when it heats up, or when it rains, the damage is there. In fact, an accident is bound to happen. Uh, 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 Salila, you from Limpopo, you must look at the
Mm.
next domain and you must decide. People can't tell you at the end, hey, Gijima, run because it's coming. No, communities must be involved before to find out how this waste will be regulated so that we can be safe. When they try and tell us this is the measures when it comes, then it's too late because that sludge, the with all the pollutants, actually will push you down. As I said, one of the women we spoke to when we were in Free State last month or so ago told us that she was swept 12 kilometers away, right?
Mm.
12 kilometers. And she said she just kept praying and kept her head above the sludge, and she survived. And that story made a lot of news. She's a victim, a white Afrikaans lady. And there are many such stories that we want to try and tell on, on September 11th.
No, definitely. The conference continues. I think through tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. What
That's right.
resolutions or what kind of resolutions or outcomes are you hoping to emerge with from the conference? And most importantly, what role should everyday South Africans, not just activists, be playing when it comes to holding mining, conglomerates and companies accountable, and government in itself?
I think we need to take a greater interest on waste. We need to ask questions. How's our water impacted? We're a water-starved country. Using the example of these mine dumps, they were movable property before. But when you remove them to mine, you find acid mine drainage, our water's polluted, etc., etc. People can't drink it, etc. So those kind of things, people must just ask, what's going to happen to our water supplies? What's going to happen to our electricity? Our water supplies? What's going to happen to our air? Now, no one's saying that we don't need electricity, but it cannot be a trade-off that you want lights or you want air. I mean, really, it's a silly choice. So people must ask very, very basic questions, and also think more consciously as a consumer. You're buying all the smartphone that uses cobalts, etc., etc. People are dying in the DRC, particular for those kind of minerals. We got to just start thinking that that we don't have to change these things every year. Is a new event out? A new market out, a new brand? How do we use older stuff? How do we make things more durable? So true, they're using our language about recycle, but they're using it for their own aims. And so we need to think about this. Yes, we must do small efforts, but join a local community group, link up with others. The environment is not a white person's issue. These issues are matters of our life and death. We see them far more starkly, you know, and we need to take it up. And climate change is not a hoax, it's real. Farmers can tell you in your area that, hey, it's too dry, my seeds are not growing, etc. So it's that level of engagement. All these big structures, presidential commission on climate, they're talking numbers and that they don't talk lives and impacts. And that's a problem.
No, most definitely. Hassan, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure. I think this is a very important, I think workshop that you guys have come up with, and we'll definitely be following it quite closely.
Salano, so sorry. Salano, we're
Yes,
going to have to respond. We have to respond to the bill. We have to
yes.
respond. So that's the big part of it. And we have to find new ways of engaging people who are reluctant to listen to the poor. Because these things are written by consultants, and they just put together something. It's not even felt deeply by those who wrote it because a consultant did it as a project. So that's one of our objectives. But our biggest problem, and this, your humanitarian radio station must highlight the plight of poor people. People have severe chronic persistent hunger. How do we address that to make people stronger so they can read, think, and act? But the hunger, the austerity And the lack of strategic vision in our country is affecting civil society and poor people very, very deeply. We need to find ways of rebuilding that so we can get stronger. So it's all linked, but one clear outcome is to respond to the critical minerals and to respond to the mining law and ask for more rights for people, not less.
There was Hassen Lorgat from the CSOs Tailing Dam platform, shedding light on, I think, a very, very crucial but often overlooked conversation: the rights of communities living in the shadow of South Africa's extractive industries. Really appreciate you giving us your time again, and assalamu alaikum. Goodbye.
Walaikum salam. Kalibu.
There you go. Yeah, I think very, very important conversations, issues about mining communities, mining rights, and especially for those that live so far away from these mining communities that are so affected by the impact that these mining companies, most of them not even from here in South Africa, we don't think about it that often. We don't think about how we ultimately have electricity here. And as Hassan mentioned, how the people in Pumalanga are affected by it. And I think, yeah, as the country races to meet global demand for critical minerals, the question needs to remain, and the question needs to continuously be asked: who ultimately gets left behind? Who gets left with the mining dumps? Who gets left with the pollution? And is there any kind of restitution for those people? So we'll definitely be tracking these developments. Also, the issue of Jagersfontein, that fallout there in the incoming legislation around mining and mining rights and rights of mining communities. I think very important, and you need to keep an eye on that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's our hashtag Africa Focus feature. We'll be looking at the headlines that are currently grabbing the eyes and ears of the continent. More on that after this.